And we are live. So, let me welcome all of you to this wonderful Google Hangout. This is David Gruder and our special guest tonight, Kimberly Schulte. And what we are going to be focusing on tonight is how to deal with what's getting in the way of your authenticity, how to step into your authentic greatness. And this is a first ever Google Hangout between David Stanley and myself. And we have Kimberly with us because she is going to be providing a little later on a female perspective on the challenges of authenticity and transparency. So at the time that we bring Kimberly into the conversation, we'll go ahead and have you introduce her at that time, David. But in the meantime, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself to everyone? David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'll be happy to. I'm David Stanley. I am introducing myself. I do think we have a little bit of a time delay, so it'll take a second for you to probably hear me. Can you hear me now, Dr. Gruder? Can you hear me clear now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Dr. Gruder.
I can hear you
to Dr. Gruder. Hey, listen, isn't technology awesome, guys? We're just having so much fun already. I'm David Stanley. I am an author, speaker, and filmmaker, the co-author of a book called The Elvis Encyclopedia, Journals of the Young Apprentice. Dr. Gruder and I wrote that book a couple of years back. The book is about authenticity and transparency. The book is about my stepbrother Elvis Presley and the issues that he dealt with, what we dealt with together. But its primary focus is on authenticity and transparency, and so I'm excited to be here with you guys. I know a lot of you, hey, what's up? Good to see you guys. And I'm glad you joined us tonight. And Dr. Gruder, it's always a pleasure being with you. And of course, later I'll introduce our special guest, Kimberly Schulte, who in herself is a mentor, speaker, very successful in her business, and her skills is communicating her objectives within the structure of transparency and authenticity, and a barrage of other wonderful things that will be beneficial to us tonight. So I'm glad to be here. Let me just say to you, open your heart, open your mind, and tonight it's all about transparency. Tonight it's all about opening up your authentic self. And what does that mean to be authentic? To be transparent, to deal with the issues that are both that are the things that perpetuate and communicate your message collectively forward, and then the other things that are holding you back, those ugly words like fear and self-doubt and self-sabotage and unworthiness. We're going to be talking about those things tonight. We're going to be sharing some personal experiences from my life with Presley and the lessons I learned on that journey as I took that Conversations with a King journey very seriously, 17 years of my life. Dr. Gruder is going to be using his expertise. I love it. Dr. David Stanley Gruder so happens to be what his name is. I know, go figure, but it's true. And, of course, Kimberly will be interjecting her expertise as well. So I'm glad you're here. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Gruder, and we're going to get this party started.
Sounds great. Can you hear me, David? Can you hear me? Are we there? Can you hear me now?
I can now. Thank you. I hit the button that says I can't hear you. How much fun is this?
Great. Good. So listen, just for the two of you, for David Stanley and for Kimberly Schulte, one other thing I want you to do is go to the left side on your screen and click over change your setting. Do you see it? Webinar Jam.
And where would that be, Dr. Gruder?
On the left side.
What color is the box?
It's a white box with a red lightning bolt in it. It's about halfway down.
Just got it.
Got it.
Oh, I'm excited. My brother Billy's already asking questions. So, hey, Billy, what's happening? Hey, Liz, what's up?
So
Go ahead.
You will see on the right side, yes, that there is a you've got some options around chat and attendees. So I just wanted you to be aware that that exists. So you can see all of the people. We've got a bunch of people with us right now. If you click on the attendees button on the right side, you'll see all the people that are with us. So I want to welcome all of you that are on the line with us live. And so here's where I want to start, David. You know, you and I wrote this this book together, Conversations with the King, and it was really private Elvis. It's not Elvis the icon, but Elvis behind closed doors, and the lessons you learned from him spiritually and emotionally, not just about life, but about spirituality. And not only did you learn about all of the gifts and experience all of the gifts that Elvis had that weren't really shared so much with the public, but that he shared with all of you behind closed doors, but you were also privy to his challenges. You saw what he struggled with. And one of the things, of course, that not only Elvis struggled with, but people in general who are in the limelight, who are in the public view, struggle with in a way that's even more dramatic than everyday people do, is the question of authenticity. How do you get to be who you truly are in the face of public opinion and in the face of all of the positive and negative publicity that can come to you? So what we talked about, one of the themes in Conversations with the King that we talked about was the three selves that Elvis struggled with and that you and I struggle with as human beings, and that, as far as we can tell, all of us struggle with around authenticity as human beings. Shall we talk a little bit first about those three selves?
I think so, and I think, you know, to talk about the book itself, because it's part of my personal journey, and I think that the experiences of individuals can be a roadmap for others. For me, when I met you, Dr. Gruder, several years back at CEO Space, you know, B.J. Dorman's phenomenal forum that he puts on 5 times a year, you're a part of that, a very strong part of that. And, you know, we met there, and I remember the first time I talked to you, I was talking about transparency. I was talking about growing up in a very facade-laden lifestyle. And before I have this communication and start talking on this level, what I say about Elvis Presley is in no way to belittle, to put him down, or to insult him in any form or fashion. My brother Billy is on the conference tonight with us, on the webinar tonight, and he can attest to this as well. We both loved and adored our big brother very, very, very much. We moved into the Graceland Mansion in 1960 as a result of my mother, who divorced my father and married Vernon Presley, Elvis Presley's widowed father, thus making Vernon Presley my stepfather and Elvis Presley, Billy and I's, and my brother Ricky's stepbrother. So I'll be saying some things that may sound derogatory, but they're not meant to be. But when I first met you, David, we were talking about Elvis and the influence that he had on my life after 17 years of those formative years, from the time I was 4 until I was 21 years old, almost 22, I was with Elvis Presley. And there was some phenomenal positive impact, some wonderful times, but there was a lot of great things I learned to do, and there was a few things I learned that I shouldn't do. And I often tell people, and when I met you, Dr. Gruder, how, you know, it was a blessing and a curse. Overcoming the negative ideologies of that surrealistic upbringing has been my journey. And I realized that as when I first met you, I once said to you, David, I said, you know, I'm not able to close the casket. Every year people talk about Elvis Presley. Every year people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people go through his house. They go to Elvis Week. The last couple of years ago, there were 75,000 people standing in front of his house saying goodbye 36 years after his death. We had talked about that, and I had looked back in an introspection of my life going, how was I brought up and how was I raised? By no means do I blame my past on the end result, but at the same time, we can't ignore those influences that were in my life. So growing up with Elvis and being a part of his life and losing him like we did, I was amongst the first to discover his lifeless body the day he died. Left a lot of questions in my life and made me question myself about who am I and the authenticity and the transparency that I'm projecting in my life. Now, I say all that, I'm building up to something, because when I met you and I told you this and I said, David, I want to write a book about this, you were, I don't want to use the word sympathetic, you were intrigued by it. You said this is an interesting subject. Because as we talked about Elvis and we talked about the greatness of the Elvis that you knew, and perhaps even who Kimberly and her family knew as they were growing up, especially specifically her parents or whoever knows of Elvis Presley. He was a clean cut. He didn't cuss, smoke, drink, chew, lie, or lust type guy. All of his movies were clean. All of his music and his messages were pure. He was the all-American boy, and that was so true. But he died at the age of 42 years old of a self-induced drug overdose, and that's a very powerful thing to say. And again, not to be derogatory, but if you're going to deal with authenticity and transparency, you have to deal with the realities of what was taking place in his life at the time and the unfortunate circumstances of it, what it cost him. And so as I communicated that with you, I began to look at my life and talk about my life in Conversations with a King and Journals of a Young Apprentice from a spiritual journey. There are those three sides, David. There's that, what we call the sanitized public self, the self that we want everybody to know, that projection. Hey, look at me. I'm David Stanley, Kimberly Schulte, Dr. David Gruder, Elvis Presley, whomever. That image that we put up to everybody else. And that image is important, but I often remind people that image is nothing more than an introduction to substance. And then there's that second part of us is that private dark side, that side that we're not proud of. Those things that we have done in our lives that we wish we hadn't have done, those mistakes our stepping stones or whatever you may want to qualify them as or call them, that were parts of our life that we're not proud of then and now. And there's still darkness in our lives now that we do everything we can to suppress. When we deal with the authentic self, or excuse me, the sanitized public self, we oftentimes will do anything to protect that image. And growing up with Elvis Presley, the most important element of his life was protection of his image. My brother Billy and I, as well as Ricky, all protected Elvis's bodyguards and security, but we also protected that image because that dark side of Elvis was not seen by anyone. Which brings us to the third part of this Elvis, which was the authentic spiritual Elvis. David, we talked about this, the Elvis that hundreds of thousands of people flipped out over every time he walked out on stage. For example, he did Aloha from Hawaii in 1973. 1 billion people watched that TV show live. He weighed 167 pounds. He dominated the world. 5 years later, he weighed 255 pounds, slurring his words. He couldn't remember where he was at. But the authentic, gifted Elvis, the God-given, gifted Elvis, the audience, they didn't see the darkness, they saw the greatness. And as we talked about that and formulated that within the structure of Conversations with a King, it was very cathartic for me because I put out who I want the people to see. I have the dark side of me, then I have that authentic side of me that I want to communicate within the structure of my personal and professional life. And so as we did that and we went through that journey, it was such a cathartic experience. I learned so much about myself that all of a sudden I became the author of authenticity. And I credit Kimberly Schulte, who is not only a dear friend, but a phenomenal partner in my life and also a very strong accountability coach. I don't like the word coach, but I'm accountable, and I'm grateful for that. But we were talking about authenticity. I became the author of authenticity and transparency. I think what took Elvis down, and we'll get off of Elvis, what took Michael Jackson down, what took down Kurt Cobain, what took down Jimi Hendrix, Joe Cocker, Liza, what's Liza Minnelli's mother's name? I can't remember. Judy Garland. I mean, these iconic individuals that self-destructed, imploded as a result of putting up the image so strong that they didn't deal with that dark demon side of their lives within the structure of authenticity. In other words, when you have a problem in your life and you bury it and bury it and bury it and bury it, it finally catches up with you to where eventually it costs you your life or something thereof like that. It may not be your life, but it can cost you your success, your relationship, your personal happiness, your business structures. And so within the structure of communicating that and talking about that in the book, I feel like that I've come to the conclusion that transparency, authenticity is the secret to life, the essence of life. It's like the song by The Who says, "Can't you see the real me?" Or Johnny Nash sings, "I can see clearly now the rain is gone." Let them see the real you. And when I coach and mentor and work with people today, yes, I'm an author, yes, I'm a speaker, and yes, my primary job is a filmmaker and storyteller and the president of Impello Entertainment. But as I look at people and coach them today, let's be authentic. Let that authenticity peel back the layers of that God-given gift and step into the greatness of the authentic self. Now, I don't know if that's the answer that you were looking for, David, but I think that's the essence of what we're communicating tonight. David?
Well, I wasn't looking for any specific answer. Can you hear me?
Did I lose you, David?
I'm here.
I can, but you know me,
me?
you give me a microphone in 10 minutes, I'm gone. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
That's okay.
David,
Yeah,
I
I
think
can
you're
hear you
off.
fine.
Can you hear me?
Well,
Cool.
let's
Yeah.
try
So
this again.
I think
Can you
that's
hear me now?
the elements of. I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Hey,
Yes,
Kimberly, can you hear us
absolutely.
both?
So we can
I
all
can hear
hear
you
each other.
both. I think this is hysterical.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Kimberly. uh, right. So the uh, uh, the phenomenon you're talking about, David, I think is so important because not only has it been important for you, I think it captures the essence of us as human beings and the struggles we live with. For example, in my upbringing, my father was a very well-regarded man in the community. He was beloved. He was very charismatic, and his public self was a very appealing public self. Behind closed doors is where his shadow, his dark self showed up. He didn't show that self out in public, but he would rage at us in private, at my mother, my brother, and me. And the public never saw the rageful man who would blow up and then give the person in the family that he was angry at the silent treatment for long periods of time. And by long periods of time, I mean up to months at a time. He would not talk to my mother or my brother or me, whoever it was that he was angry at the time. And this is not what the public saw. So I learned very quickly growing up in my family, watching my mother behave in a socially acceptable and my father behaving in a socially acceptable way that he didn't behave in private, I learned to do the same thing. I followed in their footsteps. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree and all of that. And so I learned to develop a public self that I thought was the kind of self that people would like and admire and be attracted to. And the problem that I experienced growing up was that because on some level inside myself I knew that the self that I was trying to portray myself as, that wasn't my real self, I fell into the trap that Groucho Marx, the comedian, worded so well, which was any club that would have me for a member, I wouldn't join. And that whole attitude was that if you like me for my public self, then I can't really trust you because you don't really like the real me. And how often have we experienced that when we're starting to get to know a new friend, or if we're entering into a new romantic possibility? Do they like me, or do they like the mask that I wear? And this is a challenge that I think most of us have, and that very highly visible public figures like Elvis or Michael Jackson or Kurt Cobain or Judy Garland, or the list goes on, and not just in show business, but in athletics, professional athletics, and in politics. That it's just more exaggerated among public figures, but us more private figures that aren't quite that high profile, we struggle with this same thing. And I'm certain that everyone who's listening and watching on this Google Hangout right now can identify with this struggle. So my question to you is, how do we come to end up sacrificing our authenticity in the first place? Why do we do that?
Well, I think, from my perspective, it's all about the grand facade. We're afraid, we have fear, we haven't defined our quest, we haven't made a decision, we haven't focused on the end results. I think we live in a safe zone. If they see me now and they like what they like, we sometimes often get in a situation to where we're afraid to project and be ourselves because of the end result. Um, I used to do a thing, and I still do, and still use the formula of solutionary dynamics, solutions for success, which is basically quest definition plus action, plus decision, plus action, minus fear, plus focus, plus managing the quest is the secret to success. I think what happens is we have a tendency to fall into the plan B. We let the fear, we let the lack of definition, we let the lack of focus, our decision, we let these things get in the way because we oftentimes feel like we don't deserve it, that we feel that we somewhere along the line that we're incapable of doing it. And it goes back to what I was saying. I got to expand on this a little more. I believe that every one of us have a God-given gift, and I mean a God-given gift. Call it the universe, call it God. Let's universalize this right now. And I think if there's sin in the world, David and Kimberly, I'm going to bring you into this conversation as well, is if we have a situation to where we suppress that, if there is sin, that's sin. To have a phenomenal gift given to you by the universe, God, let's call it, again, whatever. I'm going to call it God's for the sake of the communication. And to not utilize that is in fact a wasted life. And I think sometimes when we feel like that we are special, because everybody on this broadcast is special. Everyone, how long does it take the average person to succeed? Well, the average person doesn't succeed, and the average person is not on this broadcast. And I think what we have to realize is we have a gift, and it nudges at you. I mean, I'm looking in here at Jill and Nicole and Flo and Barry and Alice and Doug and Dee and my brother Billy and Jim Wilkerson and Crystal. I'm looking at some people who are on there. I know many of you, and we all know that we have a very specific gift. I know you have that gift. But sometimes we're afraid to step into it because we don't want to step out of the comfort zone. We've built such a facade-laden image to where it's working for us. It's kind of like I was talking about today at our mastermind group that Patrick Carney puts on here in San Diego. We sometimes are more into the affirmation than we are the actual application of success. And we want to hear it, but we don't want to do it because for whatever reason we're afraid to define a quest. And I tell people when they start stepping into authenticity, the number one thing they need to do in transparency is what do you want to be when you grow up, and what is stopping you from being it, and why are you living in this arena called Plan B when you've been designed for a Plan A? And David, we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but I think it comes down to defining that quest. What do you really want to do? And let's go a little bit further. What have you been called to do? What is your God-given gift, and what is it going to take to get you to that level? Transparency and authenticity takes us to where it's this, and I can, and I will, and I have. And transparency also does the other thing. Transparency and authenticity means I'm scared to death. I'm freaked out. I'm afraid to do this, or I'm not capable of doing this, or I don't deserve this, or I'm not worthy. And we come up with excuse after excuse after excuse, and this is a byproduct of protecting that image that we have out there rather than dealing with the reality of the gift that we have. So I think it starts with a quest definition. And I'm going to go a little bit further, but David, I want you to comment on this, and I'm going to go ahead and bring Kimberly in on this because we've had many talks about this and communicating with each other. And Kimberly is a great mentor. She's a great speaker. I'm really excited for Kimberly today. Congratulations! I want everybody to give her a round of applause. Sharon Lecter's new book on Think and Grow Rich for Women came out today, and Kimberly's story is a part of that book. I'm excited for you, Kimberly. We're excited to have you on board. But Kimberly, tell us what you think about the transparency and authenticity, and perhaps let's stay on that quest definition and decision. What's your thoughts on this? Ladies and gentlemen, Kimberly Schulte.
Well, hello, David and Dr. David, and hi, everybody. So I'm Kimberly Schulte, and I am, as David introduced me, an AHA Mastery expert and speaker, author, also yoga instructor. So I really am in tune with helping people to understand, that they don't need to play so small in such a big world. And sometimes we don't step into our calling and our authenticity because we're afraid. And it's interesting how fear can tend to hold us back, and even our own, David, you touched on it, unworthiness, feeling not, that we don't believe in ourselves enough. And it's interesting because being authentic, it seems in our times right now, the word authentic gets almost overly used. It's so, watered down and saturated that, if we kind of go back to the true definition of what is authentic, authentic is meaning you're genuine, it's real, it's true, it's bona fide, it's not false, it's not copied. That's being authentic. Something is, papers are authentified, or how am I, like, authentic papers, and like bubbling over myself. See, this is authentic right now. I'm being nervous. Okay, I'm a little nervous, so that's authentic too. So, what you want to do is really just understand what it is. We all have fears. I get up and talk to people all the time. I coach people all the time. But every time I step in on stage or even in this scenario, I have butterflies in my stomach. I'm nervous. But do I stop myself from doing it? No. So what we want to do is just feel that fear. And, having fear doesn't mean being fearless. Being fearless is having less fear. It's not having no fear. It's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And kind of going into that authentic self of just really understanding, who you are and the gifts that you have. And I think that, Dr. Gruder had asked, where does it start? Why are we not stepping into our authentic self? And I think where that can start is I loved when Dr. Gruder said, putting on that public self, and I call it the master of masking. We want to wear these masks in front of people that we don't want them to really see who we really are. Perhaps for a variety of reasons, for being rejected, for not being accepted, for not being understood, right? So, and also possible rejection and doubt from ourselves and not really understanding who we are and our gifts that we have to offer. And I think that kind of stepping into understanding your authentic self is spending time with yourself and really knowing what you want and who you are, and then believing that you can go get it. And then doing the work, like you were talking about, David. You're talking about feeling affirmed in who you are, but not actually taking the actions to go after your dreams and to go after your quest. And so it's one thing to believe in who you are, and then it's another thing to step out in faith and take that action. And then so you fumble, you fall, you take the next step because there's no failing, there's learning. And I think sometimes we have to peel back the layers of the onions that we create around ourselves as shells of protection, because we don't want anyone to see who we really are for fear that they might not like us. And if we can just learn to love ourselves and like who we are, regardless of whoever else approves or disapproves, then and only then can we really step into our authenticity.
David, I want to ask you a question. Are you with me, David Gruder, Dr. Gruder?
I'm there. I'm here.
I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear it.
You
David,
don't
in the
hear
book
me?
that we wrote together, Conversations with a King, Journals of a Young Apprentice, I do now. Do you hear me? Technology is awesome, isn't it? David, I was saying in the book Conversations with the King, when we wrote Conversations with the King, you made a quote, we live at the level of our wounds. Can you expound on that? I think that's what Kimberly and I are both saying, and stepping into authenticity. Sometimes we masquerade so many things because we're dealing with some wounds in our lives that are not dealing with the wounds that make us, progressively and perpetually move forward. Can you address that issue? I think we're having problems with David Gruder's setup tonight. Kimberly, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I think there's a little delay.
David, are you there? Yeah, I think he's having a. Okay, you know what, David? When you come back, let us know. Can you hear me? Nod your head, yes or no. Looks like it's the Kimberly and David Stanley show. As Elvis would always say, the show must go on. Kimberly, do you agree that people live at the level of their wounds? I mean, oftentimes they get to that place where they're comfortable with that wound. They don't address that wound, and that blurs their vision. That keeps them from being transparent. That keeps them from being authentic. That keeps them from defining their quest to really sit down. And although they may define it, they don't step in it because they're more comfortable with living in the level of their wounds. I mean, what do you think about that comment?
I absolutely agree with that comment. Living at the level of your wounds, I think that what that really speaks to is that, we get in that comfort zone. It's easy to get in the comfort zone, and then one cannot, break out of that comfort zone, because even if it's a toxic situation or a dysfunctional situation, it is what we know. So we understand it and know it, and even though it doesn't feel good, we know what to expect. It's predictable. We understand it. We're very experienced in the dance of the dysfunctional dance, so we continue to cycle in that, because to step outside of it is the unknown. And we'd rather stay in a dysfunctional known than step outside and get into a functional unknown that may hurt a little, sting a little, or be scary, or possibly even lead us to failing. And a lot of people are so caught up in failing they don't look at failing correctly. Failing is learning, it's growing, it's changing. So I think that David, you and I have talked a lot about, I've shared with you that my belief system is that people will. You like my cat? That's a nice authentic background there. People will. She blew my moment, by the way. Walked right by me. No, but what I completely believe is that people will live at the level of their self-esteem. So you will date someone at the level of your self-esteem. You will take a job at the level of your self-esteem. You find your partner. You will treat yourself at the level of your self-esteem. You'll allow your circle of friends, your influences at the level of your self-esteem. So meaning, if you're healthy, you're going to be surrounded with people that are exceptional people. If you're living a very high level of self-esteem, you're going to be in great relationships. If you're not, you're going to be in toxic relationships. You're going to be in a job that's beneath you or doesn't serve you, because you're going to accept things that are at that level of that self-esteem. So again, kind of like living in the level of your wounds, right? So it's increasing that level and really enhancing yourself and growing as a person so that you can become authentic. So, Dr. David Gruder, we miss you. We got to have you back.
Let's see if I can talk to him. Gruder, are you there, Dr. Gruder?
We can wave at him.
I think he's got a sound problem. I think that's what's going on with it. Stay with it, Dr. Gruder. If you can hear us, you're here in heart and spirit. We're going to carry it until you come back. When you come back, you say something. Kimberly, I want to come back to you on this one. Do you think that creates a situation to where people can't have definition in their lives because they're so bogged down? I mean, the expression of you're the 5 people around you.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about now the people that you draw into your life. At the level that you live is where you're going to be.
Right.
Let's get some practical application. How would you break that trend? How would you step out of that? What would be the thing that you would do to go into a different direction? Is that a conscious decision, or what's the secret there?
It is a conscious decision, and I think that at first, the first step is awareness. You can't change what you don't acknowledge, and you can't change what you don't know to be true. So if you're living in an untruth, and you're living in a circumstance where you know that something doesn't serve you, but you're in denial over it, then you won't change. So the first step is creating an awareness around it, and also tapping into our internal knowing. How often do we get these taps from God or taps from the universe? Patrick Carney is one of my best friends and mentors, and he always tells me, Kimberly, follow those taps from God, those taps from the universe, because if you don't follow those taps that are really your internal knowing and sharing with you what you should be doing next, guiding you, then you're going to get a slap. And if you don't listen to the slap from the universe, you're going to get hit by a Mack truck. So right. I think the first step I would encourage anyone to do is to really start to meditate and start to listen to that internal knowing. And because how often have we made a decision or we make a choice and then later we're like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Why did I do that? I knew it was wrong. I knew it, but you did it anyway because you were in that comfort zone. You're in that dysfunctional dance. So you did what you knew to always do, even though your internal knowing was saying, don't do that. That's not going to work for you. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, yeah, I knew it wouldn't work. So it's stopping, slowing down, being present in the moment, and really listening to those taps and then following them, taking action to follow them. The other thing is, Louise L. Hay, she wrote this beautiful book called You Can Heal Your Life, and she talks immensely about the power of affirmations and really speaking faith. I think one of the things that we need to do is speak faith into our own lives. The mental chatter, the negative self-talk that goes on constantly in our brains really is an effector that people don't realize. And if we had people in our lives that talk to us as poorly and as negatively and mistreated us as much as we do our own selves, how we talk to ourselves, calling ourselves names, putting ourselves down, we're our worst enemies sometimes. So a lot of times it's just changing that self-talk, becoming more present, and then replacing it. It's not just enough to not think negative thoughts. You have to think positive thoughts on purpose. And you need to apply them in your life and speak in that faith. And I think a part of it is making the conscious decision to, again, weed your garden. Look around. Who is in your life and what things are in your life? What habits, behaviors, addictions are in your life that are negative conductors, that are not serving you at your highest purpose. They're not helping you to show up as the best version of yourself every day. You have to weed those out, and it has to be a conscious decision to do that. I think a lot of people want to change their life, and then they're stuck in indecision. They do nothing about it other than complain, I don't like it, I don't like it. So, but they're not taking action to change and make those positive changes.
Well, I think, I just got an email, everybody, from Dr. Gruder. He's lost all sound. He's lost, he's staying with us because he's kind of hosting the situation. Dr. Gruder, we hope you come back. Also notice Patrick in his chat box says, I think they're uncomfortable. Patrick, we're not uncomfortable. We're just dealing with technology, and we're going to stick this thing out and communicate our objectives to the very best we can. But in talking with Kimberly, I think it's the great thing that the great problem. And that we allow at the level of our wounds that we live at not to define a quest. I mean, to me, when I talk to individuals, Kimberly, and the people who are listening to us, what do you want? What do you want to be, and what are you willing to do it? Now, if you want to build this facade of image, and I'm okay, you're okay, and all that all day, that's one thing. But you're going to be empty inside. You're going to have no substance. And that goes back to when I talk about Elvis. This guy had everything. This is a guy that did a concert in front of 1.5 billion people, a guy that sold 2.5 billion records, 37 silly but successful movies, 500 fan clubs in 29 countries, the most popular individual in the world, but somewhere inside he was deep down and empty because he couldn't rise to that level of loving himself. And I think that's what happened to him when he dealt with the authenticity of who he really was on what we call the dark side of his life, which we all have. Again, we're not picking on everybody. I'm sure I could sit here and tell you something about my life that would peel your hair back. Like, wow, Stanley, I can't believe you've done that. And I've written about stuff like that in my book before, in several books that I've written, because I want to be transparent. And I say that to say this. If you have something in your life that's dark and keeping you back, deal with it. Now, you may not publicize it. You may not communicate it. But if you can, it certainly can be cathartic. I know that we've talked about things in your life, Kimberly, that you're writing a book that's got some very powerful things in your life that we'll be dealing with, that the world will be dealing with. And I know the story very well. It's a very powerful story of shift and change, but it is survival. And you had to make decisions. In Conversations with the King, and writing the book Conversations with the King, I'm very transparent in talking about, and again, people call them mistakes, I call them stepping stones. But it's how we deal with the adversities and triumph over adversity that's the key in our life. And the only way that you can make a conscious decision and step into a defined quest is to make that decision that, okay, this is who and what I've been through, this is who I am, but things can and will shift with a conscious mindset shift. And I think, and going back to what, where this seems to be going within the structure of the formula of solutionary dynamics, quest definition. What do you want to be? And if you're listening to me, get your notebook out. What do you want to be when you grow up? Why aren't you doing it? And when you answer the questions, practice authenticity and transparency. Well, I don't want to do it because somebody may think I'm silly. Or I don't want to do it because my spouse may think I'm nuts. Or I don't want to do it because somebody will judge me or put me down and call me certain things. Or I don't want to do it because I'm full of fear, or I'm indecisive, or I can't focus, or I can't manage. I mean, right? That's authentic. Like the cat walking behind you, that's authentic. David crashing and burning on this video feed and his sound feed. We can't do anything about that. He keeps working at it. He will come back. But my point is, answer those as honestly as and transparent as you can. And again, if you have situations in your life that those of you who are listening to me, well, David, you don't understand. I've this, I've that, I've been through this, that, and the other. So is Kimberly, so is Dr. Gruder, so is myself. We can't live in the blame game. We can't live the victim for the rest of our lives. The great thing about tonight is very simple. Those within the sound of my voice, I'll say this to you, and I mean this with all my heart. I don't know what you brought to this webinar. I don't know what you brought to this communicate with us tonight, but I know for a fact what you can take out, and that can be a conscious decision to shift and shift now. And you're saying that's too easy. Listen, don't make life so complex. And, some people who don't do it wind up on the other end of on the far end of the spectrum by dying at a very early age, i.e. the rock and rollers that we just communicated, or companies that don't succeed. They're failing before they start because they've got this list of reasons and they haven't defined the quest that can take it to the next level. Yeah. So that's how I want to address that issue. Kimberly?
And I want to talk a little more, David, about what you were saying about being authentic. And it starts with, being authentic and being true with yourself on facing those things that are holding you back, and really looking at, why am I not where I want to be? First of all, not only where do I want to be, but what is stopping me from being where I want to be? So you're looking at, really taking a long, hard, honest, genuine look in the mirror, and at all your greatness and all the beautiful things about you that will help you to soar. But what are illuminating, my dear friend and mentor as well, David Corbin, talks about illuminate what's not working. No more sweeping it under the rug. We have to illuminate it, look at it, face it, follow it, and fix it. So, like for me, for an example, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about empowerment and helping people is so that they can show up as the best version of themselves every day. And one of the things that I went through, I'll use my own personal story, and that's why I'm so excited to be selected to have my story featured in Think and Grow Rich for Women by Sharon Lecter, which is authorized by the
Awesome.
Hill Foundation. Yeah, super excited. The launch is today. Everybody go buy that book. It's just
That's
incredible.
awesome.
These are stories about women, because when Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich originally, it was mostly male-dominated, and now trends have set differently, and so we want to explain maybe the human experience on a female level, but it isn't just for females, it's for everybody. It's a human experience. So one of the things that I learned that was stopping me from my, being my authentic greatness was my lack of being able to make decisions. So when I not only read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, I studied it. I read it probably more than 5 to 6 times. I bought it on audio tape, listened to it more than a dozen times, no exaggeration. I keep it by my bed. I highlight it. I just open it up randomly. These are the kinds of things, if you really want to change, you have to immerse yourself in material that you are going to grow from and learn from. And one of the things that I learned is that his principles, his 13 principles, one of them was on decision. Leaders make decisions quickly and are slow to change them. And I read that and I just got chills, because I was like, wow, I do the opposite. I am slow to make a decision and then quick to change my mind about it, right? So what am I doing that I need to look at? And what was happening is, when I really delved into that, is I was stuck for my authenticity. Is I had to look and say, okay, I was stuck in indecision. And so I was deciding not to decide. And that's what indecision is. It's like you're making a conscious decision. Indecision isn't avoiding a decision. It's not being stuck and not making a decision. You're making a decision, but you're deciding not to decide. But eventually, it will creep up on you, and you will have to decide. Either you're going to be falling backwards and staying stuck, or even regressing, or you are going to make a change and leap forwards. And so once I was able to do that and realize that when I made a decision towards my authentic self, when I made a decision towards my passions, then I became more empowered. I was terrified, by the way, fearful, cried on my knees to God, like, okay, I am not strong enough. And finally, I learned I am strong enough. We all have what's in us, everything that we need. And I think sometimes we just lack hope. And if we can have that hope and surround ourselves with people that will, maybe we borrow their faith in us until we can grow in our own faith. And so once we can make little decisions, and it's all about taking action. So the first step is you need to make a decision. You got to decide. And then once you decide, you have to take action on that decision and then follow through. And then you become more empowered. You can see yourself on the other side of that adversity and get more proud of yourself and realize, wow, all that fear I built up thinking how bad it was going to be, now that I'm on the other side of it, it really wasn't that hard. So now when the next thing comes up, the next challenge, we get easier. So the first step for me, especially in my story that I shared, and there's a lot more detail, you got to read it and Think and Grow Rich for Women, but for me the big movement where I was able to get real with myself and become really authentic was I was procrastinating, I was stuck in indecision, and until I faced it, illuminated it, followed it, and fixed it, and still continue to work on it. I mean, it rears its ugly head constantly. So those are the things that we have to realize, is that just because we make a decision and we take action, it doesn't mean it's over, right? Sometimes we get opportunities that continue to present themselves to remind us, okay, this feels familiar, and I might have fallen back a little bit again, but here's the thing. It's like, what you have to realize is that once you're able to face these things and start to make shifts that might not go from, A to Z, there's all these steps in between. However, you may not be where you want to be, but at least you're not where you used to be. So just acknowledge yourself in the process and encourage yourself and congratulate yourself, and then also do that for others. Be an encourager and help other people with what their challenges are.
Well, I think that, we were talking about quest definition, and you took us right into decision. And too many people make a decision not to make a decision. And right now, within the sound of our voice, I'm going to reach out. There are people listening to us whose lives could change right now if they made one simple decision. A decision to follow the dream, a decision to peel back the layers that's keeping them from living in plan A, a decision to define their quest. I think it all comes down to, really comprehending what you want to do and what you've been called to do and what your gift is. And then the decision to do that, I mean, decision is probably the most powerful word in the vocabulary, because you're going to decide to do something, and right now you're making a decision. You're going to listen to what we're saying, or you're going to ignore it, or you're going to take application and go, wow, I need to step into the next level. I'm looking at names of people who are a part of our public chat, and they're they know, I got to do this, I got to do this. It's not a got to, it's an opportunity to. Look at things differently. And when I think of decisions, it was funny in the mastermind group that you're a member of as well, Kimberly, today. Yes, Mastermind, and Patrick Carney does such a great job with it. I was talking about decision, and I want to encourage people to make a decision, and I want them to make a decision that's going to increase the quality of their life by defining the quest and moving forward. Now, when making a decision, sometimes it's just hard.
Yeah.
But the decision not to make the decision, in turn, can be more difficult. Now, when I talk about decisions, I always read a story that my dad left in a memoir in a book that he sent me after he passed away. Billy, you'll appreciate this, my brother. Because it's not easy for me to make a decision sometimes. It's very difficult, even now. I mean, people think I'm this bright bulb of hope, and I am at times, but at times I have my fear storms, and I have my quest blur, and my decision process gets a little thin. But when I think about making a big decision, there's two kinds of decisions. Those that we seem to think that are not important, that, well, that's just a simple decision. Then there's that life-threatening decision. And I say to you, all decisions are life-altering and can be life-threatening, or life-changing, or life-enhancing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I was reading this today in the mastermind group, and I hope you don't mind my, since our technology is so weird, I'm going to read it from my phone. And David Gruder, we miss you. I see your pretty face there with your headset on, and you're all ready to talk. And can you hear me? Nod your head. He's just staying with us, and we'll have another one of these, and David will be back. But I want to read something about decision. Sergeant William J. Stanley, my dad, was a World War II combat veteran. He was at the D-Day landings on June 6, 1944. Last week was the 70th anniversary of D-Day, and day before yesterday was Father's Day. And when I think about making the hard decision, or not making a decision at all, I'll oftentimes read this. On June 1st, in the cold rain with the waves crashing over the deck of the boat, we set out. It was a miserable 6 days. My fellow soldiers, not used to the rhythmic rocking of the sea, became seasick. The chill and... Are you thumbs up at me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep going.
But anyway, this is what I do. When I have a hard time making a decision, I read my father's words from that historic day. My fellow soldiers, not used to the rhythmic rocking of the sea, became seasick. The chill and the dampness bit through my uniform. I became to realize the severity of war, and we were not there yet. The sky was dark with hundreds of bombers, and I remember the fear inside of me erupting as the storm and the cold played havoc on my exterior. At 3 in the morning, on June 6, 1944, we were offloaded to LCM craft, about 36 feet long, each holding about 40 men. Each of us occupied 1 square foot per man and carried about 125 pounds of equipment. Now, I'm setting this up. Now, here's the part I want you to listen to. We circled for 1.5 hours in the storm and headed for the beach. 100 feet from the shore, my landing craft hit a sandbar. Thinking we were at the beach, the coachman dropped the ramp, which was the signal to disembark. We ran into 12 feet of water. There was widespread panic. The weaker and non-swimmers drowned. The war ended for them 100 feet from the invasion of Omaha Beach. The shock, the fear, and the reality of what was happening is indescribable. My feet touched the beach. I made my way to the shore, stumbling and pushing bodies of my American comrades aside. There was only one way to go, and that was ahead. Machine gun fire hit the water, and the bodies became sandbags and protection. Not one American son was prepared for this. Everything was instinctive, and I kept moving forward. We huddled behind the sand dunes of the beach while the artillery continued firing toward us. The choice, and we all have a choice, and that's what the decision is, was to either huddle there and be killed by machine gun fire or to regroup and move forward. We gradually advanced, and we established the beachhead. Now, what does that mean to you? That was life-threatening decisions that in the midst of stark, raving fear, those men, including my father, made, and they survived the day. Now, when you sit down and you have to make the hard decisions in life, i.e., Kimberly, we surround ourselves with 5 successful people. The people around us is where we live. If we're hanging around people who are always down and sad and upset and always pulling us down, like the 12 lobsters, there's one trying to crawl out, the other 11 are pulling down. Well, if 11 of your fins are trying to pull you down, one decision you must make right now is either talk to them and try to bring them with you, which more than likely they won't come, or eliminate that.
Mm-hmm.
Love them, bless them, and move forward and be the lobster that gets out. Making the decision to step into a new business. David, I don't know how. I've defined the quest. I want to make the decision to do it. I don't know how. Learn how. There's plenty of seminars and institutions, CEO Space being one of them, Secret Knot being another, to where you can learn information, valuable information of how to enhance and build a company. But it all starts with a decision. David, I have a habit, a life-threatening habit that is pulling me down emotionally and physically. Eliminate that. You know, make the decision to eliminate. David, I'm in a bad relationship. Seek all the help you can and do all you can to save it. But if it's not there, the decision to walk away. These are life-threatening or life-altering decisions, and those decisions have to be made. And if you decide to be indecisive, you know what indecisive is. Somebody told me I was indecisive the other day, and I told them I wasn't sure. I mean, that's the inside joke. The bottom line is indecision is not making a decision at all and rolling with the flow. And then the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting the same results. So I say define that quest, make that hard decision. Again, I have hard decisions. I'm in the middle of a multi-million-dollar film project called Growing Up Graceland. I talked to my brother, Kimberly. I talked to you about this a lot. Some hard decisions, very hard decisions. And when I don't want to make those decisions, I'll anchor to this story that I just read you about my dad. Find a story you can anchor to and look at the circumstances that that individual was under when they made that decision. Not an easy decision to make, to fight for your life. And you may not be crawling across the beach, but you're establishing a beachhead within the structure of your own life and how you're going to do things and how you're going to succeed at doing it. So we've talked about quests. We've talked about decisions within the structure of authenticity and transparency. If these are weaknesses in your life, they're not necessarily weaknesses. But if they're things you can't deal with, then there's coaches like Kimberly Schulte, David Stanley, Dr. David Gruder, David Corbin, Patrick Carney, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's this an unlimited list. You want to know who they are? Call us. We'll tell you. If we can help, call us. But, you know, it's time to take control of your life, and the only way you can do that is to find what you want and make a decision. And Kimberly, here it comes. Here's the big 4-letter word. It's not cash. It's not stash. It's not hash. It is fear. And fear is that little dark room where negatives are developed. We'll sit around in stark raving fear, and we'll put things in our head, allow those things to formulate when they're no more than a thought, and destroy us from making a proper decision or defining a quest, and we're defeated. So how do you deal within the structure of transparency and authenticity? Kimberly, how do you deal with that fear?
I think for me personally, and what I recommend for any of my clients is to face it. You have to face the fear. You have to look at it and see it for what it is, and ask the fear. Looking at it and asking yourself, is this true? So if you are really afraid of something and you build up, sometimes we can build it up in our minds of how awful all the outcomes could potentially be, and we can make it so much worse than it really, really is. And so we need to stop and ask ourselves the validity of, is this true? Or have we fabricated this huge story in our minds of what is going to happen or could happen or won't happen or will happen if we go through the fear? And so, again, then, if you don't face it and you don't take action on it, we will stay stuck. And so I think that that's going to be the first step, is asking the question, asking that hard question is, number one, what am I afraid of, right? Because sometimes we want to be in denial over what we're afraid of. And what's not working? Asking yourself these questions. I mean, write these down, because sometimes these seem so simple, but we don't ask these questions. What is not working in my life? What is my biggest fear? What are some of those fears, and what fears do those lead to? And what is true about them? What do I know to be true? And so if you can break it down, then the next step is to look at, how will I feel on the other side of this fear? So let's just say, for example, you're looking at launching a new book. And I'll just use myself for an example. I've been, taps from God, taps from the universe, need my story to come out, writing about experiences in my life that I've known for 20 plus years I was supposed to write, am supposed to write. And Miles Monroe talks about it all the time, that when you have something in your life that is your gifting, your passion, what you are here to do, and it never goes away, it only gets stronger and stronger and keeps reminding you, that is a calling. That is what you're supposed to step into. And unless and until you step into that, it will never go away. It will never die. You will either fulfill it or you're going to take it to the grave, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, too, it's, getting into understanding, what am I afraid of and what is stopping me, and how will I feel on the other side of this? So once I finally realized, okay, what do I need to do to write this book? And it is my biggest fear to have to peel back the layers and let someone see more than just my public self, that they get to see behind the mask. The mask gets unveiled, right? And now they actually get to see that, there have been times in my life that I'm in a mess, right? We don't necessarily want people to see that part. But if we can get there and realize the blessings that will come in our own life from allowing that authentic self, that transparency to come through, you then become more real. I mean, if you're an author, you're a speaker, you're whoever, a doctor, whatever profession you're in, and everyone views you as perfect, you're not relatable. You're not necessarily going to be somebody that captures the heart of the human experience, the struggles that we all have. And so if you can share, a lot of us want to hide those because we don't want somebody to see, or anyone to see, how bad it really is or has been, or the struggles that we've had or the mistakes we've made. But when you're able to become transparent and allow people into your soul, allow them into that window, open that window into a glimpse of your life, then they will see their story in you. And they will then get inspired, like, okay, if David did it, if Dr. Gruder did it, if Kimberly did it, I can do it. They're no different than me. And so a lot of times, too, it's just facing that fear and then realizing, what are we really afraid of? Ask that question. What am I really afraid of? And if you can drill down to that, then you can start to address it and start, moving forward. One of the things I wanted to mention is, we talk about the authentic self, and, I was doing a little bit of research before we got on here, just to see what some other people have said about the authentic self. And what's really interesting is, Dr. Phil, I know he's, the national public doctor, psychologist, on television, but, he's got some good points. And a couple of the good points that I think that he makes on the authentic self is that if somebody asks you, who are you? A lot of times we label ourselves. Well, I'm a mom, or I'm a dad, or I'm a lawyer, right? But who are you really? Are you that label that we've conditioned and allowed ourselves to be told that we are? Or are we our gifts and our talents and our blessings, and who we are when we strip all the monetary things away? Who are we at our core? Because if we're not going to act on and be who we are at our core and live that out, that's who our authentic self is. It's who we are at our core. It's a culmination of our skills and our talents and our beliefs and our struggles and our strength and our weakness. And then if we can build on that, that's the authentic self. And if we're not living in that authentic self, we're actually living a fictional self. Okay, so do you mind if I read for a second what Dr. Phil says about the fictional self? Because I think that this is important to know. It's not just about the authentic self, it's about the fictional self. So what he says is the authentic self is the you that can be found at your absolute core. It is the part of you not defined by your job, your function, or your role. It is the composite of all your skills, talents, and wisdom. It is all of the things that are uniquely yours and need expression rather than what you believe you are supposed to be. The fictional self When you're not living faithfully to your authentic self, you'll find yourself feeling incomplete, as if there's a hole in your soul. You may have found that it's easier to fill the roles of your family and friends that they expect of you, rather than becoming who you really want to be and who you're really here to be. Living this way drains you of the critical life energy that you need to pursue the things you truly value. So when you ignore your true gifts and talents while performing your assigned talents and gifts and assigned roles, you're living as a fictional self, not your authentic self. I mean, how beautiful is that?
That's strong, and let me add to that. That goes back to where we started, the sanitized public self. What we want people to see is our disguise, our mask. And so I think the reason that we go back to it, that people have a tendency to go and live in that world, is that fear is not necessarily afraid of what people are going to think of them, but that unworthiness, that self-sabotage situation to where somewhere along the way somebody told them they couldn't. I mean, how many are in the sound of my voice who, when you were a kid, you wanted to do something? You were defined. You had defined that quest. You had made that decision. You even dealt with the fear. But as you was growing up, some authoritative figure, whether it be a coach or a Sunday school teacher, or a parent, a significant other, or whatever, a friend, an enemy, said you can't do that. They laughed at you. They ridiculed you. They just destroyed your confidence at that young, early, and impressible age when you needed support. You got tore down by it, and you've believed that lie, and you've carried that lie with you. Now, some of you are saying, God almighty, David, that's happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me. Well, there's the transparency. Look in the mirror. You're going to see something back. The transparency of your soul as you look in that mirror. Only you know you. And when you deal with that fear of somebody's going to think this, that, or the other about a horrific experience in my life, or I'm a failure because somebody told me I could or couldn't, then you start dealing with that from an authentic perspective, life will shift instantly. And I think that fear, there's healthy fear. I'll give you an example of healthy fear. Here's a healthy fear for me. Laying on my hospital bed with my last breath in my body, not living in plan A, and have settled for plan B. That's a healthy fear. That is something that I will not do. My brother Billy and my brother Ricky obviously will relate to this. My mother passed away last year. Her birthday was yesterday. She passed away last September. And when she laid on that bed, and Billy on the right and Ricky on the left, and me at the foot of the bed, and she looked at us right in our eyes individually and said, I love you, David, I love you, Ricky, I love you, Billy, and dropped her head back, and that breath left her body, her spirit left. She had accomplished everything she wanted to do. She had raised her kids. She had given us a good life. She had given us somewhat of a celebrity status with our life with Elvis and our stepfather, and we always had, and we was never in need. She gave us love. She gave us hope and understanding, and she died a very happy woman. And I thought, what an example when I lose my life, or when my life leaves, or when I split, because I never die. I'm just going somewhere else. I want to be able to lay my head back and say, I love my children, I love my significant other, my spouse, whoever that is in my life, my partner, I love my family, my brothers. I wanted to make films. I did. I wanted to be a top speaker. I was. Or I am. I wanted to be an author. I did. I was. I am. I don't want anything left on the table. And fear is what keeps me when I lay down and go, golly, I'm not going to do this, and my decision-making process is going, I just don't feel like doing it. That healthy fear kicks in and says, are you really going to lay on that deathbed and say, I could have, should have, and would have, only if I had lost the fear and made the right decision to do so? So there's a healthy fear, but this other fear of commitment. Some people don't want to be successful. They want everything in the world, but they're afraid of commitment. They're standing at the altar saying, I do, and inside they're screaming, I'm afraid to. That's a self-sabotage. And then oftentimes when we live in that sanitized public self, we want people to see this, and then that dark private self kicks in with anesthetics. Dr. Gruder and I talk about this a lot, about the anesthetics of drugs and alcohol, or too much of this, that, or the other, anything that diverts you from being the authentic self and stepping into your greatness. It doesn't make sense. The people that I'm talking to now who are on with us, you want more. You are more. You're capable of achieving every single goal and every dream that's ever crossed your mind or ran through your heart. My brother Billy's talking about decision. He said something a moment ago, and going with your heart and going with your intuition. You know it's the right thing to do, and you just can't consistently live in that fearful state of mind of self-destructiveness by letting your quest just fade away, letting your decision-making process take you here, there, and that, and the other. And it's like I said a moment ago, I don't know what you brought in, but tonight's the night I know what you can take out. This is practical application, conscious decisions and life-changing stuff. And you're saying, Stanley, and you're saying Gruder, and you're saying Shelter, there's nothing new about there. No, there's nothing new. Maybe we're just a different delivery system, but we're all saying the same thing, and that's living Plan A in transparency and authenticity. Perpetuating the greatness, dealing with the negative, and somewhere in between, eliminating that, this, that, the other that's keeping you from it, and aggressively moving forward. So we've talked about definition, we've talked about action, we've talked about decision, we've talked about fear. Now, Kimberly, I want you to talk a little bit about, I'm a director, I'm a filmmaker, it's my favorite word, everybody say it with me, action, 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 action. Listen, there's a lot of people, Kimberly and Dr. Gruder, I can see you still on with us. He's hanging in with us. He's had due to a technical problem, Dr. Gruder is unable to be with us, but I can see him here, and he stayed with us. But I want to talk about action. A lot of people are listening to the sound of our voice, Kimberly, and Dr. Gruder, you're with us in spirit. They're excited, they're ready to go, they've defined their quest, they've made a decision, they've eliminated fear, but that one thing keeps knocking, that demon of doubt keeps knocking on their hearts. And they're just letting that demon of doubt. Yeah, and this happens all the time. You're all excited. Golly, I can do it, David, Kimberly, Dr. Gruder. Man, I'm going to rock. I'm going to rule the world. And as soon as you hang up this phone tonight and go to sleep at night, your head's going to hit the pillow and you're going to hear a knock of a demon saying all these things that we're discussing, and this is where you make the conscious choice to take action. And when I say this, listen to me. It does a person, including you, listening to the sound of our voice today, to sit up and take notice and keep on sitting. So action. It's time to take an action. Before you hang up this phone, before you get off of this webinar tonight, I want you to specifically write down an action item of what you're going to deal with, what decision you're going to make, what quest you're going to define, what decision you're going to make, and do something about it today by eliminating the fear and progressively moving forward. Kimberly, give us your thoughts on action.
I think it's good.
Well, that's good.
Let's just dumb it down. You gotta act.
I do want to move along quick because it's already 10 minutes after 7. I'm going to field some questions, but action, Kimberly.
Action. Here's the thing with action is what you need to do is, I think a lot of people, like we talked about earlier, you touched on this, is that people go to seminars, they'll go to coaches, mentors, they read books, and then they get all riled up, they get all inspired, like in jazz, and then that feeling of excitement dies down, and then they never took any action. And a lot of times it could be, I'm not saying it always is, but it can be overwhelmed. Like sometimes we don't know what action to take, and so we're not sure where to go, so we don't take any action, right? So I would say the first thing is to look at it and say, okay, write these questions down, you guys. Like, ask yourself, what am I most afraid of? And then you answer that, okay? If I didn't have this fear, I would, and then you fill that in. If I could do anything and know that I wouldn't fail, my next step would be, and fill that in. And then say, today, my one task I will complete is, fill that in. Tomorrow, the next step I will do towards my goal is, fill that in. So if you want to really do step by step, put it down in paper, put it in writing, do one thing at a time. Sometimes we can get off these webinars, we can finish reading a book, we can listen to a speaker, and there are hundreds of things we could do. And so we leave overwhelmed and we do nothing. Take 3 things. My dear friend Mark Anthony Bates taught me this, which I love. Is he said, and he's a mentor and speaker. He said, take 3 things from any seminar you go to or any time anyone coaches you. Take your top 3 things that you would act on. Write them down. I could this, I will do this, or I will do that. Then out of those 3, you implement 1 today. The first one. And when that is finished, you then implement the next one the next day. But you have to take action. You have to do quantifiable, measurable steps, and then have an accountability partner. Make sure you are answering to someone other than just yourself, because otherwise we can get stuck in making excuses and justifications. So get an accountability partner who isn't going to buy into your excuses, is going to call you out on the carpet in a kind but loving way, but very, very firm. So those are the things that I would say about action.
And
first
I
and
think,
foremost.
I go with that. And, Kimberly, you're my accountability partner. I've been on a diet, and it's easy for me to sit down and go, I just love to eat. I love to watch my football and eat my pizza, drink my cold beer. And it's okay. Next week I'll get on it. And,
Right.
I look at Kimberly as an accountability partner. I've started my diet about 2 months ago. I'm down 26 pounds. I'm going down 30 more. So
Right.
I made a decision. I've lost the fear. I see the end result, which is our next thing because it's focusing on the end result. Storyboarding, law of attraction, seeing it in your mind. John Lennon said it, imagine, it's easy if you try. That's our next one. And I'm not going to go too much further on this particular one because I want to take about 20 minutes to 15 minutes as we close out in a few moments to field some questions from other individuals. But mental focus and visualization of the end result is absolutely essential.
Right.
I
And
mean,
I agree with that. Like I want to say that too, David. What you just said is really critical. Is even though I said take the next action, the next best action you can take, you have to always look at the end game first. What is the end objective, and then back it out and put a plan of action, a strategy that you will put into place to get there. A lot of people don't know where they're going, and they're flailing around. So you have to know where you're going. What's the end result? What's the goal? And then back it out.
And there's a lot of things you can do. There are great seminars, there's great coaches, there's great books. It doesn't really matter. I mean, there's no excuse for ignorance with the internet today. If you want to know something, you just go and find it. You go and seek it out. You find the right people to communicate it. You can learn it, earn it, return it. I'm a member of an organization called CEO Space. I've been a member for 12 years. In fact, I go to Vegas next week as one of the featured speakers, and Dr. David Gruder is also a member of that. He's on the board with CEO Space, and it's a great place for business structure and communication, capital language, presentation. We have authors, we have people who invent things, we have technology, we have filmmakers. When I went to that 12 years ago, I had a mindset of entertainment, and I was an author, a best-selling author at that, but I didn't understand and comprehend business. So I say this for an example, not necessarily push CEO Space, but I went and learned business. Now I literally raised millions for my own films and my own projects, and that's an example of seeking out information via the internet and through seminars. And, of course, there's a lot of other great ones out there. Secret Knocking, Greg Reed's group is a great one. Coaches like Kimberly, myself, Dr. Gruder, hundreds of others. But, focus on the end game. There's an empty spot in my house that I dust it daily, and it's for an Academy Award. And you're saying, now, David, that's bold. It was Kimberly who reminded me, bring it big. She always says that when she communicates, bring it big. And I'm bringing it big. I'm working on a film called Growing Up Grayson. It is my intent. It is my vision. It is my mental focus to win an Academy Award for that and or another film that I'm currently working on. That's visualization. That's the law of attraction. That's putting action into place. That's making decision. That's defining a quest and having mental focus. And then the last thing, and I'll just address this one, is managing your quest. Managing your quest. You're a corporation. If you're a businessman or woman, you are the corporation. You're the face of the corporation. And you're saying, David, but I don't know how to manage my company. I don't know how to do legals. I don't know how to do the accounting. Pick your expertise and hire the rest. Delegate, delegate, delegate. These elements of quest, definition, decision, action, lack of fear, focus, and management will equal success, all within the structure of transparency and dealing with the realities that only you know you can by looking at your sanitized public self. What the world sees, okay, where's the substance? Remember the old commercial from Wendy's, show me the beef. Where's the substance? Image is nothing more than an introduction to substance. Your private dark self, eliminating the fear factors, eliminating the self-destructive ideologies that's kept you down and kept you in a hole, and dealing with your true, authentic spiritual self, that gift that you know that you have that is being driven and perpetuated forward by the Spirit of God, the universe, heaven, etc., etc., etc. Like Kimberly said, the nudges come. The taps on the shoulders are always there. You know it's there. You know you want to aggressively move forward. You know you can. You know you will. But you've got to be authentic about it and deal with the things that are working authentically and the things that are not working, and step into the greatness of both to equal success in your personal and professional life. So that's basically what I want to close with, communicating, stepping into the greatness of your authentic self. I do want to field some questions. I do have the chat public open. If you have a question, please post it. Say, Kimberly, I'd like to ask you this. David Stanley, I'd like to ask you that. Dr. Gruder is still on. In fact, there he if you can see him wave, Doc, can you? He says,
So,
you see, he's the captain and commander of the ship. So he's got us all fooled. Kimberly, you were going to say something?
David, before we start to field some questions, let's talk about the event coming up Saturday, September 13th for the Authentic Greatness.
We do have coming up. We haven't chose a location yet, but we want you to come back to the address that you came to when you came here, and we'll be posting the information about the first step into your authenticity, the greatness of the authentic self, one-day conference and our forum, or one-day seminar week, whatever you want to call it. It's a day with Dr. David Gruder, an integrity specialist, an authenticity, a transparent specialist. He's a doctor of psychology. He's one of my best, if not my best friend. He's a genius at what he does. He will be one of the speakers and presenters. Yours truly, David Stanley, on authenticity and transparency. We'll be teaching the techniques and communicating the objectives of that program personally, and teaching and training you on it. And then also, Kimberly, you'll be a part of that as well. It's going to be on September the 13th here in San Diego, the place to be determined. For more information, authenticity, it's where you came here. Just for lack of a better term, I don't have the address in front of you.
It's www.authenticgreatness.com.
Exactly. Thank you, Kimberly Schulte, for that. See, she's prepared. And so go to that, and more information will be posted on that, and we look forward to seeing you spending a day. It's going to be limited to 60 people. We're going to sell it out fast. We've got a lot of people who are very interested in what we're doing. We're excited about it, and we'd love to have you again on September the 13th. And Kimberly, please read that website one more time.
www.authenticgreatness.com.
Okay, so I'm looking over at the board, and we only have about 14 minutes left. Is there anyone on chat that would like to ask us any questions about what we've been communicating tonight, or share something that you'd like to share, that you'd like for us to share with everybody else? Please feel free to do so at this time. I'm looking right now. David mentioned our event. That's Dr. Gruder. Details in the last post below. Nicole says, great job, David. Thank you, Nicole. Dr. Gruder says, talk about the event. Again, happy birthday, Mom. Nicole, happy birthday, Nicole's mom. Anybody have any questions that you'd like to us to field? We'll take another minute to wait for you. If not, we'll continue on with some more information about authenticity and close out. We're glad you're here, but we do want you to contact us. Personally, you can contact me at ds@davidstanley.com. That's ds@davidstanley.com is my email if you have any questions about what we discussed tonight. Kimberly, could you please give them your coaching information and your website and your email address as well?
Okay, so being completely authentic, I'm working on being better at answering my email, so I will answer your email. So actually,
so don't write her.
No, write me. Actually, I'm actually keeping myself accountable. My email is KimberlySchulte@me.com. So it's KimberlySchulte@me.com. If you want to Facebook message me, that's also great. So you can find me on Facebook and message me there.
I just got a note from Dr. Gruder. Go to authenticgreatness.com. Go to authenticgreatness.com. Dr. Gruder, the author of The Integrity Revolution, your books are phenomenal. I don't have your information in front of me, Dr. Gruder. I wish I did. Obviously you can go to me and Kimberly, but I think Dr. Gruder's right. Go to authenticgreatness.com to learn more about September 13th, and obviously to learn more about what we've communicated tonight in this one-night webinar. Now, this has been our first time. I'm not going to make apologies. We're not tech heads. We're communicators. Once we work out the bugs, we'll be doing this again. Dr. Gruder and I are teaming up. We'll be doing a lot of these. We'll be asking Kimberly back periodically. She will be a part of the one-day forum, but this is something that Dr. Gruder and I are putting together, and we've missed you, Dr. Gruder. Now, I did get something from my brother, and I'm going to do it, Billy, and because I always do it. I never close a communication without sharing a specific story. But before I do, I think I have a question from Kim. I'm from the age of 14, have been adult, both of my siblings, my children, my grandchildren, my parents, and grandmother, because Nan suddenly died, and anyone, let me get to the question. I don't even know what the real me is. Wow, there's Kim. I hope you don't mind me reading this. My grandparents and my parents and grandfather, because my Nan, I'm sorry, Kim, it's moving around, suddenly died. So anyone has ever seen in me is the go-to person. I don't even know who the real me is and want to know how to find that person. I want to find out hard to show for the world to see the real me. Kimberly, you want to address that? Do you have any comments on that for Kim? Do you see that question?
Briefly, I do. What Kim's really, what her last part is I don't even know who the real me is, and want to know how do I find that person, as I find it hard not to show the real me. So I think that what's relatable about that, Kim, and thank you for being so honest and sharing with that, is that sometimes we can get so caught up in the roles and the labels and what other people put on us as our obligations and our duties, and that becomes what we take on as who we are and what we're all about. And like you were saying about the go-to person, and then finding out who we really are, like what do you want? And asking yourself, okay, what is it that I really want? And it's because sometimes we're so busy taking care of everybody else's needs and what they want and what they expect from us and keeping everyone else happy, we don't even know who we are and what makes us happy and what we even want, because we haven't taken the time to really get to know ourselves. So I would say from where you're coming from is just be very gentle with yourself and really do some in-depth work, and possibly this could be going to a therapist or even going to a coach or somebody that can help ask you some powerful questions and guide you through that process of finding out who you really are. What are your skills? What are your wants? What are your desires? What makes you happy? If you really could do nothing else and didn't have to take care of everybody else, how would you spend your time? What would bring you joy? What would bring you happiness? And regardless of the paycheck, what is it that you want to do with your time and your efforts, and that brings you that feeling of significance, that you're making a difference in the world for yourself and others? So really exploring those questions, and I would encourage you in the beginning is to have somebody help you with that process, whether it's a professional like a doctor, like Dr. Gruder, or whether it's a coach or mentor.
I think that's good, Kim. I appreciate your candidness, Kim, for asking the question. Dr. Gruder is great at that specific thing. Of course, Kimberly, you are as well. But Dr. Gruder's really got a handle on that. And Dr. Gruder reminds me again to go to authenticgreatness.com to field any questions to talk more about what we've discussed tonight. And we appreciate every one of you. I think it's safe to say we love you guys. A lot of our friends have been on tonight, some new ones. And now you're our friends, and we'll be doing this more often. And again, go to authenticgreatness.com for more information. Now I'm going to close with a story that I always close with. I'm going to put the camera on me, and I'm going to share a little story. Why do I do what I do? Why do I love people, and why do I love dreamers? And why do I believe in authenticity and transparency? We started off by talking about Elvis Presley. And yes, there were some things that cost him his life, but that doesn't take away that he was the greatest man I've ever met. The most purest, kindest, most talented spiritual individual that I've ever seen in my life. He had the gift, and that is an understatement. But as I toured with Elvis in the 70s, we were on tour in Boston or somewhere on the East Coast. It's been so long ago. I thought it was Boston, but it was on the East Coast. We were at a Coliseum. And before Elvis would come out on stage, I would go out on the stage and make sure that the security was in place. There would be 20,000 people at an arena to see Elvis live. So you had to have security because everybody tried to get to him at the same time. Because when Elvis came out on stage, 500 young ladies would rush the stage, and 2 minutes later, 500 old ladies would rush the stage, and it was just pure insanity, which was quite funny. 20,000 flash bulbs going off at the same time. My point is this: I went out on the stage to make sure security was in place, and as I came off the stage before Elvis made his appearance, I noticed on stage left or stage right, if you're looking at the stage, there was always a challenge section. And in the challenge section, there would be quadriplegic, paraplegic, mentally challenged individuals, victims of crime or disease. Just we call them challenged. God's very special people. I was always made sure they were there. So when I came off the stage that night, I looked over into the challenge section, and I noticed a guy in a wheelchair. and he was holding a frame in his hand, and it was like a legal frame, and he was grasping it, and he was holding it tight. And I noticed as I looked at the frame, I said, "What is that?" And in the frame, there was the lyrics to a song called "Dream the Impossible Dream." And it was the song that Elvis did, "Dream the Impossible Dream, reach the unreachable star. Torn and covered were stars, I will reach the unreachable star." Beautiful song that Elvis would often do. And so I looked at this guy, and I thought to myself, I can make a dream come true. Because at the bottom of the lyrics, he had signed, "My dream is to meet Elvis Presley." So I walked up to the boy, I said, "You're coming with me." And I looked at his parents and said, "He'll be safe." I took my backstage pass off, I slapped it on his shoulder, and I rolled him backstage to Elvis's dressing room, and I said to a policeman standing outside of Elvis's dressing room, "Watch my buddy, I'll be right back." I go inside and I say, "Elvis, I want you to meet somebody." He said, "David, I got a show in 5 minutes. You know better than that. I don't meet anybody." I said, "Well, you're going to meet this guy. I can be assertive." And Elvis said, "This better be good." So I go out, and Elvis is looking in the mirror, combing his hair, putting his last touches on his stage outfit. And I rolled the guy in, and in the mirror, Elvis could see us coming in. And he saw the guy in the wheelchair, and he turned around, and he saw the guy in the wheelchair, and the guy was going, "Elvis." He could barely talk. And Elvis walked over to him, fell on his knees, dropped his head on his lap, and began to cry. He was so humbled by this guy wanting to meet him. Of all the things he could do, his impossible dream was to meet Elvis Presley. So Elvis's head was on the boy's lap, and he was crying, and he just was so overwhelmed. And the boy was stroking Elvis's hair, going, "Elvis, it's good. This barely broken up talk voice. It was just so great to see you. I love you. I love you." Well, about 10 minutes afterwards, I finally leaned down and I said, "Elvis, we got to go. We got a show to do." Elvis stood up, tears in his eyes, looked at the boy. He never saw the frame. He never saw what the boy was holding. He just saw the boy. And I said, "Elvis, that was his impossible dream." He said, "Well, let's make sure it comes true." He said, "Take care of my boy." So I roll the boy out and I say, "Elvis, no problem." I put him backstage with me on top of some monitors where he had the best seat in the house. Elvis comes out on stage, 20,000 flash bulbs go off, 500 young ladies rush the stage, 500 old ladies rush the stage. It was total pandemonium. Elvis was the king. I mean, the world was freaking out, 20,000 people. And the boy's eyes were just lit up. "Elvis!" He could barely clap his hands. His drool going down his face, his arms turned, and his body torn and covered with scars. Excuse me. And Elvis turned around. Finally, in the middle of his concert, he looked at Joe Gershio, his music conductor, and said, "Dream the impossible dream." And he broke into the song, "To Dream the Impossible Dream." It's a beautiful song, "To Fight the Unfightable Foe." "This is my story, this is my quest, no matter how hopeless, no matter how blessed, I will reach the unreachable star." And so he began to sing the song, and the boy just got more and more excited, and it was like a miracle was taking place. The guy was smiling and big tears rolling down his face. This impossible dream was coming true. And so I wanted to make it better. So I looked at one of the other bodyguards and said, "Help me out." He said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Let's put the wheelchair on the stage." So we put the wheelchair on the stage, on the side of the stage, and Elvis saw the boy and kept on singing, "To Dream the Impossible Dream." He walked up to the boy still holding the frame, and the boy's eyes are big and blue and lit up and just crying and excited. I mean, I thought he was going to come out of the wheelchair. It was like a miraculous healing. It was incredible that what was taking place. And then Elvis finally hit the last part of "To Reach the Unreachable Star" and hit that last note of that song on one knee, sang it right to that boy. And just as he was doing it, the boy took that frame and began to push it toward Elvis. And it was the frame that had the lyrics to the song and saying, "My dream, impossible dream is to meet you." And Elvis reached out and took that frame and looked at it, and the spotlights didn't go off. The song was over. And in the 1,000 concerts I did with Elvis Presley, there was never not a standing ovation. There was always an ovation, but on this night, all you could hear was 20,000 people and their tears hitting the concrete of the Coliseum that we was doing the concert in. The spotlight was on the boy. The spotlight was on Elvis. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. This is why I do a webinar. This is why I'm a speaker of authenticity and transparency. This is why I give my heart and soul to what I do and believe in people's dreams. Because that night, I saw the impossible dream come true. And as I close with you tonight, I want to simply ask you this question. What is your dream, and what is keeping you from achieving it? I believe all things are possible. I believe greater is He that is in me, that is in the world. I believe that God has given you a gift, and I believe it's all about transparency and authenticity. Take it to the world. Thank you. God bless you. Dr. Gruder, you can sign us out. Don't forget to come back and join us again at the website that we gave you earlier, and we look forward to seeing you real soon. Kimberly, thank you for being a part of this tonight. Any last closing thoughts that you may have?
No, I'm going to leave it with how you ended it. Just go for that impossible dream.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon, Dr. Gruder. Sign us out. Thank you so much.
How you doing? We missed you. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay, I can. We're missing you a lot. Did David hang up already? Yeah. Okay. I'll see you.